Be careful who you listen to. You might end up brainwashed like these guys' followers. I'm your host Yusuf, and these are the top 10 cult leaders that should be in prison. Make sure you subscribe and ring that bell to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, let's go to heaven. Number 10, Marshall Applewhite. As a young man, Applewhite attended several universities and served in the US Army. He initially pursued a career in education until he resigned from the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas in 1970, citing emotional turmoil. His father's passing a year later brought on severe depression. In 1972, Applewhite developed a close relationship with Bonnie Nettles, a nurse. Together, they discussed mysticism at length and concluded that they were called as divine messengers. They operated a bookstore and teaching center for a short while and then began to travel around the US in 1973 to spread their views. They gained only one convert. In 1975, Applewhite was arrested for failing to return a rental car and was jailed for 6 months. In jail, he further developed his theology. After Applewhite's release, he and Nettles traveled to California and Oregon, eventually gaining a group of committed followers. They told their followers that they would be visited by extraterrestrials who would provide them with new bodies. Applewhite initially stated that he and his followers would physically ascend to a spaceship where their bodies would be transformed, but later he came to believe that their bodies were the mere containers of their souls, which would later be placed into new bodies. These ideas were expressed with language drawn from Christian eschatology, the New Age movement, and American pop culture. Number 9, David Berg. David Berg, along with his wife and children, founded the organization known as the Teens for Christ, operating out of Light Club Coffee House in Huntington Beach, California in 1968. While in California, after receiving strong resistance from local churches due to his followers picketing them, he took the whole group of 40 to 100 people on the road. It was while they were camped in Lewis and Clark Park that a news reporter first called them the Children of God. In the mid-1970s, Berg began preparing his followers for a revelation he had about flirty fishing or winning important, influential men through escort. In 1975, after letting everyone know via one of his letters that his mistress Maria, or Karen Zerby, gave birth to a so-called Jesus baby, which is what cult members called babies born within the cult, Berg changed the name to Family of Love, or The Family. Eventually, in 1991, this was changed to The Family International. Berg lived in seclusion, communicating with his followers and the public via nearly 3,000 Mo letters, Mo from his pseudonym Moses David, that he wrote on a wide variety of subjects. These typically covered spiritual or practical subjects and were used as a way of disseminating and introducing policy and religious doctrine to his followers. Berg's letters admonished the reader to love the sinner but hate the sin. His writings were often extreme and uncompromising in their denunciation of what he believed to be evil, such as mainstream churches, capitalism, and Jewish people. Number 8, David Miscavige. David Miscavige is the leader of the Church of Scientology and, according to the organization, captain of the Sea Org. His official title within the organization is chairman of the board of the Religious Technology Center, RTC, a corporation that controls the trademarks and copyrights of Dianetics and Scientology. Miscavige was a deputy to Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard as a teenager. He joined the Sea Org, a management group for the Scientology organization, then later joined the Commodore's Messenger organization, a group within the Sea Org that carried Hubbard's orders to subordinates. He rose to a leadership position by the early 1980s and was named chairman of the board of RTC in 1987, the year after Hubbard's passing. Official Church of Scientology biographies describe Miscavige as the ecclesiastical leader of the Scientology religion. Since he assumed his leadership position, there have been a number of allegations made against Miscavige. These include claims of human trafficking, slavery, forced separation of family members, coercive fundraising practices, harassment of journalists and Church of Scientology critics, and emotional and physical abuse of subordinates by Miscavige. Miscavige and spokespersons for the organization deny the majority of these claims, often making derogatory comments and attacking the credibility of those who bring them. Miscavige has been investigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigation due to allegations of criminal activities within the Scientology organization. Number 7, Father Divine. Father Divine, also known as Reverend M.J. Divine, was a spiritual leader from about 1907 until his passing in 1965. His full self-given name was Reverend Major Jealous Divine, and he was also known as the Messenger early in his life. He founded the International Peace Mission movement, formed its doctrine, and oversaw its growth from a small congregation into an international church. Due to his ideology, many consider him to be a cult leader. Father Divine claimed to be God. He made numerous contributions toward his followers' economic independence and racial equality. He was a contemporary of other religious leaders such as Daddy Grace, Charles Harrison Mason, Noble Drew Ali, Wallace Fard Muhammad, Elijah Muhammad, and Jim Jones. A jury found him guilty on June 5th, but asked for leniency on behalf of Father Divine. Ignoring the jury's request, Justice Smith lectured on how Father Divine was a fraud and menace to society, before issuing the maximum sentence for disturbing the peace, 1 year in prison and a $500 fine. Smith, 55, passed away of a heart attack just days after the conviction on June 9, 1932. Father Divine was widely reported to have commented on the passing, saying, "I hated to do it," he wrote to his followers. "I did not desire Judge Smith to pass. I did desire that my spirit would touch his heart and change his mind, that he might repent and believe and be saved from the grave." That's some scary stuff, man. Number 6, Glenn Helzer. Glenn Helzer and his brother Justin met Don Godman on Memorial Day 1999 at an execution mystery-themed dinner hosted by a Mormon congregation in Walnut Creek, California. Godman became Justin's girlfriend and moved into a house in Concord with the Helzer brothers in April 2000. Glenn Helzer was excommunicated from the LDS Church in 1998 due to his substance use. Around this time, he declared himself a prophet. He developed a list of maxims he called the 12 Principles of Magic, by which he expected his followers to abide. He had plans to train Brazilian orphans to assassinate Mormon leaders so that he could take over the LDS Church and start a self-help group called Transform America, which was intended to create a state of peace and joy. Helzer collectively referred to himself and his followers as the Children of Thunder. To finance his plans, Helzer developed a scheme to extort money from Ivan and Annette Steinman, an elderly couple in Concord, California, who had been Helzer's clients when he was employed as a stockbroker. On July 30th, 2000, the Helzer brothers and Godman kidnapped the Steinmans and forced them to write checks for $100,000 before executing them. The trio then removed Glenn Helzer's girlfriend, Selena Bishop, on August 2nd in order to prevent her from potentially providing information that could lead to his arrest. To extort the Steinmans' money, Helzer convinced Bishop, who knew him as Jordan, to open bank accounts in her name for Helzer's use. He told her that he was inheriting a large sum of money which he needed to hide from his ex-wife. Number 5, Jim Jones. James Warren Jones was an American preacher, political activist, and mass slaughterer. He led the People's Temple, a new religious movement between 1955 and 1978. In what he called revolutionary self-life-taking, Jones and the members of his inner circle orchestrated a mass slaughter self-execution in his remote jungle commune at Jonestown, Guyana on November 18, 1978. Jones and the events which occurred at Jonestown have had a defining influence on society's perception of cults. Jones founded the organization that would become the People's Temple in Indianapolis in 1955. In 1956, Jones began to be influenced by Father Divine and the Peace Mission movement. Jones distinguished himself through civil rights activism, founding the temple as a fully integrated congregation and promoting socialism. In 1964, Jones joined and was ordained a minister by the Disciples of Christ. His attraction to the disciples was largely due to the autonomy and tolerance they granted to differing views within their denomination. Number 4, Larry Ray. In 2010, Brooklyn native Lawrence V. Larry Ray, born Lawrence Greco, following his release from prison, resided in the on-campus apartment of his daughter, Talia Ray. Sarah Lawrence College later told New York Magazine that it was not aware that he had been living on campus. While there, Ray started an intimacy cult in which he presented himself to students as a psychology and spiritual advisor. In 2011, he induced some students to move into his Manhattan apartment. In February 2020, he was charged by prosecutors in Manhattan with conspiracy, extortion, intimacy trafficking, forced labor, and other related offenses, following nearly 10 years of alleged transgressions with students and former students. At a bail hearing held March 2nd, 2020, an assistant U.S. attorney disclosed to the Manhattan federal court that Ray had been arrested while in bed with one of his victims. Bail was denied. Defense attorneys argued Ray, who was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder, was influenced by his psychological problems. Ray was convicted on all counts on April 6, 2022. Number 3, Magdalena Solis. Fearing the repercussions, other members informed Solis and the Hernandez brothers, who ran the cult before Solis, of 2 people who wanted to leave, with the former decreeing that the heretics be sacrificed. After these first 2 executions, Solis's crimes gradually escalated in violence and brutality. As she was bored with simple parties, she began to demand human sacrifices and devised a blood ritual. The sacrificed, who was always a dissenting member, was brutally beaten, burned, cut, and mutilated by all members of the cult before being left to bleed to passing. The blood was then deposited in a chalice mixed with chicken blood and narcotics, from which Solis drank, before passing it along to the brothers and finally to other members. This supposedly gave them supernatural abilities, and at the end of the ritual, the victim's heart was ripped out. Based on their beliefs of Aztec mythology, Solis and the Hernandez brothers proclaimed that blood is the only food that gods can ingest, and that their goddess needed to drink it to preserve their eternal youth. The carnage lasted 6 continuous weeks, during which 4 people passed and had their hearts extracted post-mortem. Number 2. Tony Quinn. During an early seminar Quinn held in 1994, he revealed thoughts on his purpose. He spoke about how he did not know if he was starting a cult, and how he felt his purpose could be to work with millions of people. He stated he required followers to submit totally to him and to not resist. He talked about being able to determine the thoughts you have, likening them to computer programs that together form a personality that is not yourself. Quinn teaches his Educo model on the 10-day remote overseas seminars, which the Educo World website concludes from a statistical sample, an increase of turnover of 62% in the first year, 108% in the second year, 190% in the third year, a total of 360%. Average income to increase 88% each year, a total of 264% over 3 years. Achieving goals 67% increase over 3 years, a 32% average life satisfaction increase after 3 to 6 months, measured as 55% after 3 years. Quinn's Educo model incorporated the 10% of the brain myth, which suggests that we don't use all of our brain, which was disputed by Chiron Benson, a professor of psychology at University College Dublin, who said Quinn's claims are simplistic in the extreme and without any acceptable research. Quinn has said now it's sometimes said to be as little as 1 to 3% with regard to usage of the human brain, and has likened the mind to a computer which has been ruined by thought programs. Number 1. Charles Manson. Charles Mills Manson was an American criminal and musician who led the Manson family, a cult based in California in the late 1960s. Some of the members committed a series of 9 executions at 4 locations in July and August 1969. In 1971, Manson was convicted of first-degree slaughter and conspiracy to commit execution for the removals of 7 people, including the film actress Sharon Tate. The prosecution contended that while Manson never directly ordered the executions, his ideology constituted an overt act of conspiracy. Before the slaughters, Manson had spent more than half of his life in correctional institutions. While gathering his cult following, Manson was a singer-songwriter on the fringe of the Los Angeles music industry, chiefly through a chance association with Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys, who introduced Manson to record producer Terry Melcher. In 1968, the Beach Boys recorded Manson's song Cease to Exist, renamed Never Learn Not to Love, as a single B-side, but without a credit to Manson. Afterward, Manson attempted to secure a record contract through Melcher, but was unsuccessful. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this one, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time. I was actually this tall the entire time.